Join Ashley and Jennifer in a conversation about experiences and support for kids of first responders. They take their professional knowledge to help with the hardest job, being a parent, with the added pressures of a high-stress job.
It's a message of support with tips on how to meet the needs of your family while still wearing the badge. This experience coming from two mental health professionals that were raised by first responders, so we get it. And we hope to create a community for others that do too.
Welcome to When the Call Hits Home. We're so excited to have you here and excited for you to get to know us.
I think it's time for us to introduce ourselves, right? Like this is our first episode and we're really getting into it. So my name's Ashley Gassner.
I'm Jennifer Woosley.
And honestly, we just are here to tell you a little bit about what we do and how this all came about. So, first, I am, I guess, Dr. Ashley Gaffner, but you won't really hear me say that again because I'm not one to say it often. But I am a doctor of social work and a licensed clinical social worker. I own my own private practice in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I specialize in working with first responders. And for me, my passion for first responders came about because I grew up in a first responders family. So my dad did 29 years as a police officer, and honestly, I didn't realize how different my life was. And Jennifer, I don't know, I think you're going to attest to this a little
We'll
bit.
definitely talk about it.
But I didn't realize how different my life was growing up in a first responders family until I was put in the position as I got older to connect with others such as Jennifer and learn about it.
Yes, and I actually also work in the mental health field. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I've been practicing for 16 years and I've worked in many settings from community mental health to an army base where they say they keep all the gold. I feel very, very fortunate that I love and enjoy my work. In some of my different experiences and working different places, I got the opportunity to work as a military family life counselor, offering support to service members that serve. And then Ashley, do you want to just talk about a little bit more about how we met and where this came about, especially since you did so much of your research and doctorate about serving first responders? You want to
Yeah,
start
so it's
there?
actually, I mean, it's a fun story, right?
Let's hear it.
It really launched us into all this. So I had started my dissertation and I was in my doctorate program, and I decided that it was time to write this dissertation.
I don't know how you did it.
Definition of insanity. And I went down, I got connected to a seminar and I went down to observe, in which I actually ran into you. And over time, I got invited back, right? So it's a 3-day seminar in which we work with first responders, police and dispatch. But it's mental health oriented. And so there's therapists there, and I was able to observe and then lucky enough to join the team. And while I was down there, I met Jennifer and finally started to connect once she told me that her dad was a police officer too. And I think, I don't know, what do you think?
I definitely think that was such a turning point. So obviously, being a mental health provider, you're wearing your own kind of hat with it, and it comes with knowledge and information, and you better be a really good listener. That's really important. I had gone to the seminar a little bit before Ashley and had a time to kind of serve. And, I was talking to Ashley about what a lightning bolt moment that was for me. Again, I had been serving different populations. I'd worked at a domestic violence shelter, I'd worked with children in care. And I kind of just a fluke got invited to the seminar. And I remember just feeling like, oh my goodness, this is where I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
in terms of just the ability to serve those that serve. And you'll probably hear me say that a lot, but I do think it's incredible for people that serve their community to save people's lives. Like they need people to back them up and serve them. And so I think in that and feeling such a calling was incredible. And Ashley and I got to just kind of chat and I guess have several meals together over those 3 days
Yeah.
and talking about a little bit what our experiences was like, because I think we are the only mental health providers at this specific seminar that are children of first responders. Obviously, their spouses and other people that have actually their own personal experiences as EMT and police officers that evolve into counseling and social workers. But yeah, we just really talked about and connected over what it meant to grow up in that home and know, I don't know, again, what your experience was. I know for me, the value system of growing up, it was about service to others.
Yeah.
there might be some generational stuff there, in terms of I had other grandparents that were teachers and all this kind of, and military members in my family. So it was always about service. And then obviously having a police officer's dad was about service to your community and kind of being a part of something bigger, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I remember the very first PCIS I went to, I totally was like, "Oh my gosh, you went and presented." And I was like, "This woman is incredible. Like, she knows exactly what she's talking about. Not only that, but she's doing my dream job. Like, she's here, she's serving, she's, helping these first responders, and that's all I wanted to do." And it's funny how you said, like, going there kind of ignited your career into being like, "Yes, I know I want it at some capacity also help first responders." And for me, with writing my dissertation and with being invited there and now being a part of it, it was something that I felt like was that turning point in my career where I was like, there's nothing else I want to do. Like, I have to help first responders.
Well, I think it's funny that I blew your mind when again you told us all about you being a doctor. So you're actually the
Okay.
brains of
Okay.
you're the brains of the operation. But I mean, are you comfortable to talk a little bit, I guess, in detail about your doctorate in terms of what your research is about, and really, I guess, talk a little bit more about your expertise and why, what we want to bring to people that listen to when the call hits home.
Sure. I mean, so I guess I would love to preference that when I say the title of my dissertation, I think it puts people off a little bit. And I never want someone to, like, this has nothing to do political at all. That is not my purpose of my dissertation. That was not my driving force. But my dissertation was on the civil unrest and how it impacted active law enforcement officers. And the real reason why I picked that was because I was in my master's program when a bigger event did unfold, and kind of quickly realized right then and there that, like, being a child of a first responder is not always a very positive thing in this
No,
world.
right.
And I'm gonna be honest, a little vulnerable episode one, so y'all better protect me here. I kind of felt really small. Like,
Mhm.
oh my God, they're all talking about my dad.
Mm.
Like, you're talking really bad about my dad. And it scared me, but then it was a big motivator for me to be like, well, let me figure out more.
Mm.
And so I set out on this path to just really hear their stories and how going through civil unrest events impacted not just them, but their families as well.
Mm.
And, being able to explore that opportunity with these officers and get these firsthand narratives from them about what it was like for them and their families was truly life changing. And I think for me, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, like, we do talk a lot about officers and we do talk a lot about their spouses, which is 100% needed. But most of them were giving me details about their children and how bad they were hurting.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt that too,
Mhm.
right? Like, your kid felt that. I remember feeling that.
Right.
I remember that. And actually, it was while we were working together, we were sitting in the back talking during
Mhm.
a break, and you had, gosh, I'm going to be honest here. I think it was. It was something more along the lines of something our fathers would say, or how we would kind of get disciplined, in which all of a sudden this light bulb went off in my head and I looked at you and I remember going, "Oh my gosh, you went through that too?" Like, I didn't think anybody else understood what it was like
Right.
to go through that, and it was because you were a child of a first responder as well, right? So, like, everything that I have worked for in my doctorate's degree and then just kind of landed in my lap was like, we don't get talked about enough
We
in a
don't.
career that.
We don't. Now I will say what a first responder kid response of being in something where you're uncomfortable and feel small, which I hate that that was your experience. But let me take that and let me empower myself and let me do something about that. I do feel like a lot of the first responder that I have the honor of working with or have experienced just in general in this world are all about looking for problem solving, looking for solutions, which I think is an incredible thing. But I think that acknowledgement about what our roles are in a family with a parent with a really high stress job,
Yeah.
with a lot of shift work, unfortunately, having to kind of see people on their worst bad days, the impact that that has on a family, but specifically, we're really here to talk about kids. And as Ashley and I have grown and talked about, gosh, this dream project, really thinking about too, not just for first responders who are parents right now and ways to coach and be there and reflect on things and using our expertise as mental health professionals, but also wanting to reach out and create a community. And Ashley, you were so great about this to say, well, we want first responder kids that are over 18 too, like any place where it's just like you can be seen and supported and knowing that your family is great. All families have their stuff, but hey, maybe there's some skills, some things that we can learn more about that can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that our listeners, right, like our audience is going to be engaged because we want guest speakers on here and we want
Mhm.
like first responders of all sorts, firefighter children, EMTs, everybody like to come forward and join us in this journey
Right.
and we can learn from each other and talk to each other and connect on
Mhm.
what it was like similar wise, but then also talk about maybe some of those differences that we saw too because I know for us, right, like I can connect with you and say, "Hey, oh my gosh, that was so true." But when I talk to a firefighter's child, right, I'm like, ooh, that's different. That's a little
Yeah.
bit of a different world.
Yeah, how hard is it not seeing your parent for 48
8 hours,
hours?
yeah.
And when you're little, you don't know what a minute is. So how do you determine time and a parent's home, a parent's gone, a parent's home, a parent's gone, or, dispatching as well. I think I've shared this
Oh,
in the
yeah.
class that I taught. I don't know if I've shared it in a while, but I'll never forget, being in my dad's car and hearing the dispatcher's voices on the radio. And they were just kind of like a part of us, like they were such familiar voices. And I know we've talked about with dispatchers we worked in how they feel really kind of
Yeah,
unseen and
yeah.
not included at times. So yeah, so all those things we want to incorporate and feel, and really most importantly, that you're heard, supported, and understood here as you listen to us kind of talk about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of how we all we started this huge project, right? Like we both realized, man, we have a lot in common, but yet different maybe from general population in terms of kids and what, how they grow. And then we went on this little journey together of like, but how do we focus in on this then?
Hmm. Well, you definitely see a need. Like, well, how do we capture that need? How do we help and support that need? I didn't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt.
Oh, well, no, I'm glad you did because I honestly was like, I'm not sure how. And so I remember you were like, hey, you listen to podcasts, like we listen to podcasts. What about this journey of starting one? And so you know what? Why don't I hand this mic to you? Because
I
let me
might
tell
be
you,
the
Jennifer
podcast
here is
expert.
the expert on podcasts. So tell them
I
why. Tell them why we decided to do the podcast.
I definitely am all the podcasts that I can enjoy. And listen, there's lots out there. So we are really excited that you're listening to ours for sure. But I definitely believe in the power of podcasts. I also think they are so much more conducive to our lives and lifestyles, especially when we talk about and hoping to reach parents out there. We are too busy to sit down
Yeah.
with a book that can be kind of clinical or be a little bit wordy or heavy, or every profession has its own language, and so you're kind of learning a new language, whereas podcasts, I think you can really get the information and go pick up your kid from school or get the dishes done. So it's just a better way to communicate, and especially with first responders who maybe have some downtime or sitting in their cars or at the department and all the different things like that, or the firehouse. So just a terms of just a I think a good platform to reach that allows you to while we have our busy lives.
Yeah, and I think hitting back on that piece of community, like
Mhm.
we hope so much from this to build community of like children of first responders and just first responders and their families in general to be able to connect by listening to us, by interacting on our social media pages, by reaching out to us and wanting to be a part of it. But I think that a podcast gave us a better opportunity to reach more people and to
Oh,
build that.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's really not too many. I mean, go support your independent bookstores because those are awesome, but it's a little bit easier to reach a podcast nowadays. So we will do want to tell you about this podcast and why this podcast, because there are so many different podcasts. And I think that
Yeah, like
there's,
what makes us different?
well, I think that there's great podcasts for a lot of different professions and things. But what we really want to hit, especially Ashley being such a driver for the community piece, which I think is so important. But we really want to utilize our expertise as clinically trained mental health professionals with our real life experience of growing up in a home with a first responder. We really want to explore healthy strategies to navigate life as a parent, as a first responder, and you will never hear us try to act like we know what it's like to be the parent of a first responder, because I don't know what that's like. Do you know what that's like?
No, I have no idea.
We don't. But what we are experts on is relationships, development, resiliency, all of those things that we really want to help you. And again, that coping of what that experience was like, even again, if you're not a parent right now, too, like, but you just have the experience of growing up in a first responder home.
Well, and I think that's what is unique, right?
Mhm.
Like we're hitting this kind of into twofold. One with this podcast is like children of first responders in general and what that's
Mhm.
like and how to navigate life as a child of a first responder. But also as that first responder, how do we get through having children and having this career? And
Right.
I think that's what's really powerful.
Well, and I think it really comes back to with our title. And we really kind of bounce like, what is the title of this? What is this going to be? And I think it's true. I think we can always respond. And I think even I'll speak to being in the mental health profession. Sometimes it's a lot easier to solve and be there and be present for somebody else. And I think of first responders that are out rescuing,
Mhm.
problem solving, responding to calls and taking care of that. But what happens when our life has a call? What happens when there's a crisis at home? And I definitely see that. I see healthy families. And listen, life can be hard. Unfortunately, we can lose a loved one or somebody battling cancer, other things that just happen
Right.
in life. Goodness gracious, having pre-adolescent child, like that is a hard time in life. And how do we endure that? How do we kind of get through those speed bumps even when we do have great coping and we are resilient?
Right.
And so we just want to help with that and share. And I think Ashley's been great too about saying, let's get other people's voices and opinions
Yeah.
and really hitting home. And it won't just be us. We'll have some other
No.
voices on
Yeah.
here and getting to hear their experiences as well. I do think we want to talk a little bit what to expect from this podcast, which again, Ashley, the aspect of community, but I think support and understanding is really important. Again, what our experiences are, Ashley and I connected so much because we saw each other
Yeah.
and our experiences. Of course, they're not identical by any means, but man, there are some things that, wow, you too, me too. And so giving that, we want you to feel seen and understood, along with the gain information on resiliency, childhood development, the biology of the brain, emotional regulation, and obviously so much more. And we want this information to be presented in an easy to understand way with interviews and guests sharing their experiences, as well as tools to utilize on your own lives.
And I do want to emphasize that, like, that's going to be really cool about this is that we're not just going to be talking on here and leaving you hanging. We plan to incorporate some tools, like literal things that you can take, whether you're a child of a first responder or the parent of a first, not a parent, but you know what I mean? You're a first responder as a parent, right? And so we want to be able to give you these physical tools that you can use, that you can look back on and you can take when you need them or take them now, right? And
Right.
use them and help your family through these times.
Well, and I think to speak to that, when I was able to attend the Master Resiliency Training through the Army, which I was really lucky to get to do that. It's always about, oh, I wish I can remember exactly what it was called, but you want the facts up front. What
Yeah.
is the tools? Give me the things that I need to know that would help. We definitely want to share stories and experiences, but most importantly is how can that help you? And tools is what we want to help you with and educate. And again, not in a stuffy clinical
Yeah. I
way.
can do that if you want.
Yeah, you have a whole
I did
dissertation
teach.
about
I
it.
did teach for a while. I can do it if you guys want.
Yeah, but no, we really want to do that. And so too, we're humans. We'll stumble and
Yeah.
and make our way through this. And we just appreciate you being here and hearing us, and letting us know too what you want to hear more of. We do want this to be an interactive thing, that we're not just speaking to the void.
I think I'm just so excited, not only for our journey with this podcast, but for everyone else's.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to kids of first responders, we see you, we hear you. Parents of kids, whew, hardest job, hardest job. We see you. We want to support you and your families.
Yeah. And when the call hits home, we're going to be there for them
We're here for that.
and we're going to help.
Thank
So
you.
we're excited. We'll see you guys next episode.